Have you ever picked up a book that was labeled romance, only to realize halfway through that it's probably just women's fiction? Or maybe you bought a mystery book and you are still waiting for them to find the body on page 200? So if you feel like book labels are getting really confusing these days, you're definitely not crazy. I feel like the lines between genre, subgenre, and tropes are blurrier than ever. And honestly, I feel it's ruining some of our reading lists. Welcome back to Under the Covers. I'm Francesca, and today we're going to be going back to the basics and clearing up some of the confusion around book categorization. We're going to define the difference between a genre and a trope. We are settling the romantasy debate and what does that mean. And we're going to look at some common mislabeling in books, like for example, Bride by Ali Hazelwood, which actually I feel can hurt some readers. By the end of this, you're going to know exactly how to decode some book marketing so you never buy the wrong book again. But before we start breaking down labels, we have to answer the most basic question. What actually is a book genre, and why should you care what that is? Simply put, a genre is a contract. That is the easiest way that I can explain this to you. It is a promise between the author and the reader about what kind of experience you are going to get. If I tell you I am giving you a burger, but I hand you a salad, I broke that contract. Even if it's a delicious salad, you're going to be disappointed because your taste buds were ready for a burger. And it is the same with books. If I sell you a mystery, but there is no solution to the crime, the author broke that contract. If I sell you a romance, but the couple breaks up at the end or one of them dies, the author broke that contract. And that is why understanding these terms matter, because it's not just about a labeling or a shelving at a bookstore. It's about knowing the rules of the game so that you actually get to read what you want to read. Let's look at the hierarchy quickly so you can spot the rules. So you're going to think of this like a funnel. At the very top, you have the category. Category are things like adult, young adult, fiction, nonfiction, middle grade. This is just who the book is for. It's pretty easy. The next layer down is the genre. This is the what, the promise of the story. Like I said before, romance, mystery, fantasy. But here's where we can get into the weeds and where most readers get lost. Subgenres. This is a specific flavor of the story. So take romance, for example. You can have historical romance, that is a subgenre, paranormal romance, that is a subgenre. It's the same contract. You're still going to get a happily ever after, but totally different vibe. Or let's look at mystery. You can have a cozy mystery, which is a subgenre. It's usually light. And you can have a psychological thriller, which is also subgenre, and it's dark and twisty and it messes with your head. Fantasy works the same way. You can have high fantasy, where we have made-up worlds and elves, and you can have urban fantasy, where it's magic and paranormal creatures in the modern world, like set in New York, for example. Or you can have portal fantasy, which is where a normal person falls into a magical world. Each one of those comes with a specific flavor. So knowing your subgenres is the secret weapon to finding the books that you actually love. But now comes even more confusion. You're going to add tropes to the bottom of this funnel. Because modern book marketing has thrown a wrench in all of these gears, we have started confusing subgenres with tropes a lot because publishers are using this heavily in the past few years in marketing. Simply put, a trope is just a plot device or a character archetype. For example, friends to lovers, enemies to lovers, one bed, chosen one, unreliable narrator. These are all ingredients inside of a cake. But lately, publishers and sometimes readers ourselves have been putting these ingredients on the cover, on the marketing. They're leading with that, and you kind of get the idea that that is the whole cake. So let me give you an example. Cowboy romance. Is cowboy romance a subgenre or is it a trope? Well, technically, it can be considered both. But I would say the subgenre would be Western romance, where the setting is the West and the tone is usually rugged, and cowboy is the character archetype, meaning I would consider that the trope. Obviously, right now you can go on Amazon and you'll see Western romance, cowboy romance, and all of that. Everything can be the hashtags. It gets to the point where everything feels like it's a subgenre. Now, why does this matter? For example, back to the cowboys. If you're picking up a cowboy romance because you're in the mood for that setting, you know, that Western setting, the cowboy is at the ranch, is wrangling cattle, but you get a book that was advertised as cowboy romance and it's just a guy in a hat in a modern city and he just happens to own a ranch, but nothing else is rugged about the book. You're not going to have the same experience. So when you understand the difference between category, genre, subgenre, and trope, you will actually stop being swayed by just the cute marketing marketing, and you'll be able to check the structure underneath and see if that's what you're in the mood for. And now, before we go any deeper, if your brain is already spinning with all of these terms, Don't worry, I actually put together a really simple, beginner-friendly email series, totally free, and it dives deeper into genres and all of these categories and all of the terminology, and it will help you, give you a good base for understanding how all of this works. I'm gonna leave a link down below so you can sign up if you're interested, and basically you'll become a genre expert. But now let's talk about the biggest headache, I think, in the book world right now, and that is romantasy. What is romantasy? Is it romance? Is it fantasy? Is it fantasy romance? Are those the same thing? Because I feel everyone is fighting about it, and here's the easiest way that you can tell the difference. So first things first, it is just a cute new marketing term that just popped up a few years ago. But there is a difference in terms of genre and the type of story you're gonna get between something that leads first with the romance and something that leads first with the fantasy. So the easiest way for you to determine that is you have to look at the contract. Again, remember, it's that contract between the author and the reader. If you take the romance out of the book, does the plot fall apart? If the answer is yes, if the story doesn't work without the love story, then that is a romance. Specifically, it's a fantasy romance, or yes, romantasy. The contract is the relationship. But if you take out the romance and the characters still have to save the world, defeat the Dark Lord, and there is some quest they need to complete and it's just a full story, then that is fantasy with a romantic subplot. Because yes, you can have romance in a fantasy book. So the contract there is the adventure. I think a lot of readers get disappointed because they pick up a high fantasy book expecting a spicy romantasy, and then they get 500 pages of politics and war strategy. And sometimes right now that is on the publishers because they know romantasy sells and they put that label on anything. And I see them doing that sometimes on things that are absolutely not fantasy romance. And I know that somebody that loves that type of romantasy is not necessarily going to enjoy that book, or they were not in the mood for that kind of book. So always check that contract before you buy. And finally, let's look at a real world example of why labels matter. So let's talk about Bride by Ali Hazelwood. When this book came out, the internet started screaming that Ali Hazelwood wrote an Omegaverse book. I saw countless people making lists of other Omegaverse books that you could read if you enjoyed Bride. And then of course there were people that love Omegaverse that went to read it, and guess what? They were highly disappointed because they did not get an Omegaverse story. So for those who don't know, Omegaverse is a very specific subgenre. It's usually found in erotica. It kind of blew up from fan fiction, and it has very strict biological rules. It's not just about shifters. In fact, you can have an Omegaverse book without shifters at all. So you've got alphas, omegas, you have mating heat, you have scent marking. It's a very specific flavor of book. But was Bride Omegaverse? No. It had a werewolf, it had nodding, it had fated mates, but it didn't have the biological dynamics that define the Omegaverse genre, and that is the most important part. It was just a paranormal romance like every other paranormal romance with shifters. So here's the problem. The Omegaverse readers were disappointed because it was not what they wanted. And the regular romance readers were confused because they didn't understand all this terminology. So mislabeling the subgenre broke that contract for both groups. So that being said, next time you're scrolling for your next read, remember that funnel. You check the category, you understand who is it for, you identify the genre by checking the contract, meaning what is the center of the story. Then you find your flavor, which is your subgenre, and then treat the tropes like just the cherry on top, not the whole meal. Again, if you want a cheat sheet to help you navigate all of this, make sure you sign up for the free email series. I'm going to leave that link down below. So we're going to break down the genres, the common mislabels, so that you never get tricked again. Now let me know in the comments down below, what is one genre label that always confuses you? In the meantime, I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!